everybody, welcome back to the Fitness Foundation podcast. Today we are going to be looking at how to lose body fat efficiently. Now notice that I am not saying weight loss, I'm saying fat loss. Now that is very purposeful because since getting our in-body scanner, we have seen that weight, although not redundant, there is still a place for it. We are much more concerned with the change in body composition than we are with the number on the scales. Now, if you have 20 kilos to lose, yes, of course, using the weight as an overview is still going to be useful. But I think once you get close or in the same ballpark of where you want to be, the body composition becomes very, very important. And actually measuring those changes are going to be just groundbreaking for anyone that has been doing this. I've been a coach for a decade now, and I think back to some of those early times. I think if I had the equipment that we've now got, the amount of people that would not have lost motivation, because sometimes I'd have people say, look, I'm feeling good, but the numbers on the scale is not budging, and that would cause people to lose motivation. As you would expect, because if you're putting all this effort into doing something and you're not getting that direct feedback, it's going to be difficult to stay motivated and keep doing the things that you're currently doing. So anyway, that's why I'm saying losing body fat. And today we're going to be talking about how to lose body fat efficiently. So we're going to go through the different strategies for fat loss. We're going to go through why most people waste time. We're going to look at what actually matters for long-term results, and we're going to go through some tangible takeaways, some action points that you guys can take away and put in place off the back of this. So what do people think they need to do when it comes to fat loss? So most people think that they need to start going to the gym a lot. You need to start to gym, start running, doing things that are potentially currently outside of their comfort zone, and start doing a lot of it. Most people think that they need to make drastic changes to their food. Sometimes that is true, but in majority of cases it's more about the tweaks that we need to make. People think that we need to completely cut out carbs. We think we need to starve ourselves, and then we start turning to detoxes or fat burners or things that we think are going to give us those quick wins. And in many cases, they probably will, but they result in you going backwards in the long term, which if we think about being efficient is about being direct. We want to get to the end goal as quickly and as directly as possible. If we was to take a sharp drop, but then go backwards, well, that's not going to be efficient. So the whole point is coming up with a strategy that you are able to sustain over the long term. And also something that I think is very much not spoken about enough is having a game plan for when you reach your goal. Because it's all well and good dropping 10 kilos, but do you actually know how to sustain it? We've had people come to us that have seen dramatic results in the past, but end up coming to us because they've gone backwards. So a big part of that conversation is, well, look, let's get you moving back forward, but what was it last time that made you go backwards? And then we have to bridge that gap. So what does efficient fat loss actually look like? So number one, we need to get into caloric restriction. I will not be boring you too much with calories in versus calories out, but it is the bottom line. Right, we need to be in caloric restriction. Now, as a facility, we tend to recommend a 10 to 25% reduction. Now, of course, there are always outside cases. I'm giving you the majority of what we see and what needs to happen in most cases. But of course, there are going to be some outside cases here. So, talking to the majority. 10 to 25% deficit, 25% being preferable if you wanted to be slightly more aggressive, 10% being less aggressive, but if you've had trouble in the past, it might be slightly easier to stick to. And you can be in between, you can move from one side to the other. There's no blanket prescription here. Some weeks are going to be easier than others. Sometimes life is going to change. You need to have a little bit of flexibility in there if you are going to sustain it long term. What we see is that when people are crazy aggressive, we tend to see a drop in energy, lifts tend to get more difficult, the risk of losing muscle mass goes up. So that kind of ties me into point number 2, which is adequate protein intake. So we need to make sure that alongside a 10 to 25% reduction in caloric needs, so if you require 2,000 calories, we need to be aiming for 1,800 to 1,500, that kind of marker. We also need to accompany that with adequate protein intake. Now, the reason that's important is because we need to tell you, in real simple terms, you need to tell your body that you want the muscle mass and you do not want the body fat. And the way to do that is adequate protein intake and strength training, which we will come on to in a second. Now, it seems to be that the overall protein intake is more important than splitting it up, but splitting it up still can play a role in terms of keeping you fuller for longer. Let's be fair, it's unlikely you're going to overeat on chicken breast, right? In comparison with carbs, quite easy to overeat. And in many ways, I think that's why carbs get a bad rap, is because they are much easier to overeat. So the overall protein intake is the most important, but splitting it up, if you tend to get hungry during the day, it's probably not going to be a bad idea to help you keep fuller for longer. Now, with our clients, we tend to recommend a 1.4 to 2.2 gram per kilogram of body weight. Now, that's going to differ depending on frequency of training, tolerance, like how much you're currently eating. Like if you're currently eating, nothing, then we're probably going to want to start on the lower end, right? Whereas if you're used to consuming higher levels of protein, then of course we can maybe go to the higher end. Remember, just a disclaimer here, is that I can't give any blanket prescriptions. You're always best to check in, particularly if you have any underlying health things going on. Like, don't just take my word for it here. I'm just trying to give you some numbers and some overview to work with. So we've got into caloric restriction, we're hitting our adequate protein. Now we need to add some strength training. Why? Again, we're trying to tell your body that we want the muscle and we do not want the body fat. To give you the best chance of doing that, you need to add some strength training. Now, the frequency of that will depend on your current levels of tolerance to exercise. If you are currently not doing anything, even once a week, we've seen great results on people that have gone from doing 0 to once a week. So you can absolutely make a dent in this, even if you only have 1 hour spare, if of course you are putting in a strategic program, right? Of course we want to build you up, ideally for most people, 2 to 4 days a week for the average person of strength training. Then we get into more exercise prescription and goals. To give you some clarity here, for myself as an example, I will try and train 4 days a week on strength and then a couple of days a week of some cardiovascular work, because I'm not just trying to optimize for fat loss. And I think this is the important distinction, and it's something we go through with our clients, because as you start to lose body fat and you're liking what you see in the mirror, the goals can change. So you might go from being aesthetically motivated to, cool, now I want to see how fit I can get. I want to improve my health span. And we tend to see this trend with our clients. So we get into a good position when it comes to body composition. We start seeing the results there. And then on our regular goal reviews, we go, cool, now what's the next thing? What do we want to attack next? And that's where we can start to play with the program a little bit longer. But to keep this simple, if you are optimizing specifically for dropping body fat, then slight caloric restriction, adequate protein, some strength training. Now, again, strength training 1 to 3 sessions, ideally starting to work up to that three odd sessions a week. But two is kind of a sweet spot as well. If you're new, a complete beginner, 2 can be really good, because you can do 2 big full compound movement days. But we'll do another podcast on actual programming very soon. Now, speed versus sustainability. We can achieve very quick results when it comes to dropping body fat, but that can potentially sometimes come with a cost. We've seen it numerous times where people have come in, as I said at the start, and we've got quick results, but they're in a position where, look, I'm back where I was before, and sometimes in a worse position. The reason for that is that what they were doing is not sustainable. Now, don't get me wrong. We want to be efficient. We want to be as quick as possible because you want to get the biggest return on investment for your time, effort, and investment if you are investing into coaching. But what is the point if you are a year later going to go and have to find another gym or another coach because you haven't done it sustainably? So there's two things with that. Is one, be reasonably aggressive, and by that I mean be aggressive enough that you can see a result and it's worth your time, but not too aggressive that it's you're at risk and you're starting to notice a drop in energy, a drop in libido, lower motivation, like higher hunger cues, like all these things. We have to start to tap into this stuff. On the other side of that, if you go too slowly, it's going to be unmotivating. So we're trying to find that sweet spot, because remember, dropping body fat is not forever. It's only up until the point that you feel like, cool, I'm feeling pretty good. And then we bump the calories up, because remember, you're not going to be in caloric restriction forever. You're only in caloric restriction so long as that you are trying to drop body fat. Once you are at that position where you are not trying to drop body fat, you can consume more and maintain your new weight. Now, this all helps with increased daily activity, which comes from increasing your steps, increasing your activity in the gym, because there's two sides to this equation. There is what is going in and what is going out. So if you have more muscle mass, if you are generally more active, it's going to be much easier to sustain weight loss in the long term. If you are only playing with diet as a variable, which can work, if you're at the complete beginning and you're listening to this going, I've got 40 kilos to lose here, cool, let's start with your food before we even think about the exercise, because there's some low-hanging fruit there and we can get you moving forward quickly. But there will come a point where you need to start adding exercise if you want to feel the difference and you actually want to sustain this for a longer period of time. So daily activity becomes more important at this stage. Now, if you want help with this, with fat loss, and you want to take the guesswork out and you want to work with a coach or a team that can speed up this process, hit the free intro. So head over to our website, hit the free intro link, book in, come in for a chat. We'll talk you through how we do things and streamline that process so that we can take the thinking out of this. If that's not an option for you right now, then just keep it simple. Focus on the big needles. We haven't really in this podcast gone into sleep, stress, alcohol and all this stuff. And it does play a role, because as I said at the beginning, this stuff is simple, but it's not easy. If you are currently under a crazy amount of stress, you're unlikely going to make the best decision when it comes to food and exercise. So sometimes we have to look here first. If you're always underhydrated and you're not optimally hydrated, your performance in the gym is not going to be great. Your hunger might be a little bit off. Like, there's all these things that play a role, and I suppose these again are podcasts for a different time. So we'll start tackling some of these in the 10-15 minutes over the coming weeks. But just to summarise before I finish up for today, get into caloric restriction, hit adequate protein intake, get your strength training in, and move. Get your steps up. Okay? Hope that's been useful. I will see you on the next one.